Hey there, welcome to another episode of Blake's Everyday Podcast. Tonight was a cool night. Tampa won, so they force a game 7, so that'll be Sunday, I believe, probably evening. That's what I'm assuming. Man, I got this cool remote in the mail today. For my TV, and it is really cool. In fact, I'm really enjoying it, but maybe even a little too much. It's got like a it's got like a mouse thing right here, and then it's got a keyboard, all that type of cool stuff. I don't know why I'm even bringing it up, but yeah, Tampa won tonight. Buffalo's moving on to the next round. So whoever wins our series will play Buffalo in the second round of the Stanley Cup Finals. Well, in the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And then we got Vegas versus Utah playing right now. But and looks like Vegas is gonna win, which means that Vegas will move on to the next round. I mean, it's crazy how quick it goes, but how long it takes in a way, because these Stanley Cup playoffs, they last for a really long time, it seems like. But like at least until the finals. But I guess it's not as long as I was thinking. But you got at least a solid month, and these guys are playing all the time. And like the second round is starting before even Game 7 of Tampa and Montreal, which is wild to me. But enough about all that. Had a plan last night, and we were gonna read from 4, 5, and 6. That way we can get the whole story. And let me tell you, it's pretty late, but I haven't given up on it. In fact, I totally want to do it because it's one story, and it would be a shame if we didn't just include it all in one package. I honestly wish I would have waited to read chapter 3 till tonight. That way we could include it all. That way it all kind of fit into one video, but it's not how it worked out. But here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna read 4, 5, and 6. Without stopping. Then we're gonna read all of the descriptions, and then we're gonna say our prayer. That's my plan. I hope that works for everybody. But let me go ahead and hit pause for a minute, and we'll get this show on the road. All right. So now let's go ahead and start off on chapter 4. And may I remind you that chapter 3 was supposed to continue on. So I will read the last verse of chapter 3, and then we'll just go from there. And then we're going to go ahead and just go all the way through to where we're planning to stop, and then I'll read the descriptions. That way we get the full thing, the full story, and then we can get get the descriptions in there. Okay. The priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stopped in the middle of the Jordan and stood on dry ground, while all Israel passed by until the whole nation had completed the crossing on dry ground. When the whole nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, "Choose 12 men from among the people, one from each tribe, and tell them to take up 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, from the right where the priests are standing, and carry them over with you, and put them down at the place where you stay tonight." So Joshua called together the 12 men he had appointed from the Israelites, one from each tribe, and said to them, "Go over before the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan. Each of you is to take up a stone on his shoulder according to the number of the tribes of the Israelites, to serve as a sign among you. In the future, when your children ask you, 'What do these stones mean?' tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. When it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. These stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever." So the Israelites did as Joshua commanded them. They took 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, according to the number of the tribes of the Israelites, as the Lord had told Joshua, and they carried them over them to their camp, where they put them down. Joshua set up the 12 stones that had been in the middle of the Jordan at the spot where the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant had stood, and they are to this day. Now the priests who carried the ark remained standing in the middle of the Jordan until everything the Lord had commanded Joshua was done by the people, just as Moses had directed Joshua. The people hurried over, and as soon as all of them had crossed, the ark of the Lord and the priests came to the other side while the people watched. The men of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh crossed over, ready for battle, in front of the Israelites as Moses had directed them. About 40,000 armed for battle crossed over before the Lord to the plains of Jericho for war. That day the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they stood in awe of him all the days of his life, just as they had stood in awe of Moses. Then the Lord said to Joshua, command the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant law to come up out of the Jordan." So Joshua commanded the priests, "Come up out of the Jordan." And the priests came out of the Jordan River, carrying the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord. No sooner had they set their feet on the dry ground than the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and ran at flood stage as before. On the 10th day of the first month, the people went up from the Jordan and camped at Gilgal, on the eastern border of Jericho. And Joshua set up at Gilgal the 12 stones they had taken out of the Jordan. He said to the Israelites, "In the future, when your descendants ask their parents, 'What do these stones mean?' tell them Israel crossed the Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the Jordan before you until you had crossed over. The Lord your God did the Jordan what he had done to the Red Sea, when he dried it up before us until we had crossed over. He did this so that all the peoples of the earth might know that the hand of the Lord is powerful, and so that you might always fear the Lord your God. Chapter 5. Now when all the Amorite kings west of the Jordan and all the Canaanite kings along the coast heard how the Lord had dried up the Jordan before the Israelites until they had crossed over, their hearts melted in fear, and they had no longer had the courage to face the Israelites. At that time the Lord said to Joshua, "Make flint knives and circumcise the Israelites again." So Joshua made flint knives and circumcised the Israelites at Gibbeth Haraloth. Now this is why he did so. All those who came out of Egypt, all the men of military age, died in the wilderness on the way after leaving Egypt. All the people that came out had been circumcised, but all the people born in the wilderness during the journey from Egypt had not. The Israelites had moved about in the wilderness 40 years until all men who were of military age were left. When they left Egypt had died. Since they had not obeyed the Lord, for the Lord had sworn to them that they would not see land he had solemnly promised their ancestors to give us, a land flowing with milk and honey. So he raised up their sons in their place, and these were I need to stop for a second. I need to talk a little bit more enthusiastically. I'm so monotone right now, and I think it's because I lost my voice a little bit during the game. But there's no excuse. They were still uncircumcised because they had not been circumcised on the way. And after the whole nation had been circumcised, they remained where they were in camp until they were healed. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Today I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you." So the place has been called Gilgal to this day. On the evening of the 14th day of the month, while camped at Gilgal on the plains of Jericho, the Israelites celebrated the Passover. The day after the Passover, that very day, they ate some of the produce of the land, unleavened bread and roasted grain. The manna stopped the day after. They ate this food from the land. There was no longer any manna for the Israelites, but that year they ate the produce of Canaan. Now when Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a drawn sword in his hand. Joshua went up to him and asked, "Are you for us or for our enemies?" "Neither," he replied, "but as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come." Then Joshua fell face down to the ground in reverence and asked him, "What message does my Lord have for his servant?" The commander of the Lord's army replied, "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did so. Now the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went out and no one came in. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and its fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse, and the army will go up, everyone straight in. So Joshua son of Nun called the priests and said to them, take up the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and have 7 priests carry trumpets in front of it. And he ordered the army, advance, march around the city, with an armed guard going ahead of the ark of the Lord. When Joshua had spoken to the people, the 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets before the Lord went forward, blowing their trumpets, and the ark of the Lord's covenant followed them. The armed guard marched ahead of the priests who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard followed the ark. All this time the trumpets were sounding, but Joshua had commanded the army, do not give a war cry, do not raise your voices, do not say a word until the day I tell you to shout. Then shout. So he had the ark of the covenant, the ark of the Lord, carried around the city, circling it once. Then the army returned to camp and spent the night there. Joshua got up early the next morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord. The 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets went forward, marching before the ark of the Lord and blowing the trumpets. The armed men went ahead of them, and the rear guard followed the ark of the Lord, while the trumpets kept sounding. So on the 2nd day, they marched around the city once and returned to camp. They did this for 6 days. On the 7th day, they got up at daybreak and marched around the city seven times in the same manner, except that on that day they circled the city 7 times. The 7th time around, when the priests rounded the trumpet blast, Joshua commanded the army, shout, for the Lord has given you this city. The city and all that is in it are to be devoted to the Lord. Only Rahab the prostitute and all who are with her and her house shall be spared, because she had the spice we sent. But keep away from the devoted things, so that you will not bring about your own destruction by taking any of them. Otherwise, you will make the camp of Israel liable to destruction and bring trouble on it. All the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron are sacred to the Lord and must go into his treasury. When the trumpet sounded, the army shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, when the men gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed. So everyone charged straight in, and they took the city. They devoted the city to the Lord and destroyed with the sword every living thing in it, men and women, young and old, cattle, sheep, and donkeys. Joshua said to the 2 men who had spied out the land, go into the prostitute's house and bring her out, and all who belong to her, and in accordance with your oath to her. So the young men who had done the spying went in and brought out Rahab, her father, who belonged to her. Her father and mother, her brothers and sisters, and who belonged to her. They brought out her entire family and put them in a place outside the camp of Israel. Then they burned the whole city and everything in it. But they put the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron into the treasury of the Lord's house. But Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute with her family and all who belonged to her. because she did the men Joshua had sent as spies to Jericho, and she lives among the Israelites to this day. At this time, Joshua pronounced this solemn oath: "Cursed before the Lord is the one who undertakes to rebuild this city, Jericho. At the cost of his firstborn son, he will lay its foundations. At the cost of his youngest, he will set up its gates." So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame spread throughout the land. All right. So that was chapter 5. Oh, no. That was chapter 4, 6, and 4, 5, 6, and 7. 4, 5, 6, and 7. So, we have lots of descriptions. But we'll go ahead and start off with the first one. We're 21 minutes in, and I swear it's going to take us probably 20 minutes at least to read these descriptions. Chapter 4, verses 1 through 7. The priests faithfully remained standing in the riverbed until the entire nation of Israelites had crossed into the promised land. Joshua, at the command of God, then sent 12 men back back to the place where the priests were standing. Those men were to collect one stone per tribe to set up as a memorial that would remind them, their children, and their children's children of what God had done on their behalf as they moved into the promised land. The stone would serve as a visible reminder of God's great power should the people ever become discouraged. When they face powerful enemies in the future, as God grants us maturity in our spiritual journey, we ought to establish reminders or monuments of God's presence with us. I like that. I don't have any monuments or anything, but spiritually, I guess I do. I mean, there's so many things that you could kind of look at and be like, oh, this is when I did this, or this is when I did that. But unfortunately, I don't have too much. I will say this Bible, I needed this. And this was the beginning. Getting my Bible was the true beginning of my true path. And even at that, it took me a long time to even consider doing something like this, doing like a video thing and stuff. I always wanted to do something like this, and this is the perfect thing to do it with. Chapter 4, verses 8 through 14. Joshua took a direct interest in remembering the greatness of God and honoring the faith of the priests by personally erecting the permanent memorial in the middle of the river. And at the end of the crossing, God raised Joshua at a new status in the eyes of the people. He was honored in the same way that his predecessor, Moses, had been. Sometimes it helps to commemorate events in which God provided a way when everything appeared hopeless. Then we can reflect on our monuments to God's faithfulness. when we encounter times of doubt. I like that. I mean, I'm looking around this room right now. I don't have anything, but dang, I wish I did. I need to start putting up some posters. Chapter 4, verses 15 through 24. Israel's leaders set up a monument to God at Gilgal with the stones from the Jordan River. Joshua explained that this would serve as a reminder of the miracle God has done. The drying up of the flooded Jordan River. This miracle was reminiscent of the way God delivered Israel 40 years earlier when he let his people cross the Red Sea on dry ground. We must remember that God is all-powerful and cares for us. Knowing that God has rescued us in the past can help us trust in his ability to save us today. I like that. Chapter 5, verses 1 through 9. Although the Amorites admitted they were helpless before the God of Israel, they did not turn to him for help. The people of Israel, however, took steps to ensure that their relationship with God was as it should be. In an act of obedience, the Israelites circumcised all the males among them, thereby removing the shame of their uncircumcision. Unfortunately, we do not have to go through a physical cutting to get rid of our shame. But we do have to go through the painful process of acknowledging our failures and asking God to remove the shame from us. This process can be so painful that we are tempted to hide our shame rather than ask God to remove it. I really like that one. That speaks volumes. I mean, how many of us have so much shame that we bury it? We don't turn to God. You know, it's really good description there. Chapter 5, verses 10 through 12. Here we find the Israelites celebrating the Passover, a remembrance of God's deliverance of his people from Egypt 40 years earlier. This undoubtedly bolstered the Israelites' faith as they faced the many battles ahead. We are told that God's miraculous provision of manna was stopped at this time. Now that the Israelites owned a productive land, they no longer needed food from heaven. This was a reminder that God would provide his people with that they needed in various ways, depending on the circumstances. And they would have to trust in him to act in various ways in the future. God works us in different ways at varying stages of our spiritual development. All too often we resent God for not continuing to treat us as newborns in the faith. When life isn't easy, it is not a sign of abandonment by God. It is a sign that it is ready for us to grow in wisdom and faith. God often calls us to struggle in order to grow. I like that as well. Man. We got more than 10 minutes worth of descriptions here. Chapter 5, verses 13 through 15. Note two important considerations regarding the identity of the commander of the Lord's army. He allowed Joshua to bow down in reverence before him, and the place where he stood was considered to be holy ground. This new commander, therefore, was more than the stranger, more than a man, and more than a mere angel. He was none other than God himself. When Joshua recognized who the stranger was, he quickly deferred all claims of leadership to him. Like Joshua, each of us needs to relinquish control of our lives to God. It is never too late to acknowledge God's lordship over us and to ask him to lead us in life's battle. I like that. Chapter 6, verses 1 through 14. Israel was ready to attack, but God told them to wait. God required his people to do something that on the surface appeared to be very foolish. They were commanded to march around the city day after day. The Israelites obeyed God and persisted in their faith, not fully understanding how God would destroy the walls of Jericho. If there was seemingly unbreakable barriers to our spiritual growth, God can make those barriers come crumbling down, allowing us to be victorious. But we need to do things his way, even if we don't always understand why. I like that. Chapter 6, verses 15 through 21. Once more, Israel had to wait. The seventh day, on the verge of initiating attack, the people of Israel were required to march 7 times around the city. They were also prohibited from enjoying the spoils of victory, which were to be dedicated to God. They were not to steal from God. Finally, Israel was given the go-ahead. In obedience to God, they pressed the attack and secured the victory, destroying their enemies completely. Learning to wait on God is part of growing toward maturity in our faith. God calls us to trust him, especially when every urge is to move ahead without delay. Chapter 6, verses 22 through 25. Joshua remembered the promise his spies had made to Rahab the prostitute. He commanded his men to fulfill that promise and provide safe passage for her and those with her, following the total destruction of Jericho. Rahab and her relatives began a new life with Israel because they had served God by obedience. Since Rahab was a prostitute, God obviously wasn't honoring her for her sinless. Rahab is a bold reminder that we should come to God as we are rather than to try to fix ourselves before we come. All right. And tomorrow we will read chapter 7. I don't know how far we'll get tomorrow, but I'll tell you. We read chapter 4, 5, 6. Yeah. 3 chapters. Lots of descriptions. But dear God, we come to you tonight and we're so gracious. We're so passionate to your word, Lord. And we're just so happy that you fulfilled our journey for another night. And we pray that you continue to let us walk down this glorious journey and continue learning your word, Lord. And we're just so grateful for you keeping our families safe and fed and happy and healthy. And we just pray to you, Lord, to keep your hands over us as we continue to live in this wicked land. And we just pray that you just keep watch over us and watch over our children, watch over our families, watch over us, Lord. In God's name, amen. Not the best prayer, but I'm getting really tired. And we made it through 4, 5, and 6. So tomorrow we will start at chapter 7. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your Friday night. Almost Saturday. But have a great rest of your Friday night. Yeah, I don't even know what to say. Good night.